As I was carving chapter 17 of Genesis, I came to the topic of circumcision. Now, I'd never thought very much about it as I'm not Jewish, but as I was carving the text, it struck me just how strange it really is. Why does God require circumcision? Specifically, cutting the flesh that covers the tip of the penis as the sign of the covenant. Why that particular part of the body? And why not a tattoo or some other marking? And why on babies? I had a lot of questions, so I looked into it and I found some things that surprised me. But what surprised me the most is that once you understand it, circumcision seems to be one of the most carefully thought out symbols in the entire book of Genesis. My name is Francisco and this is Carving the Bible. And on this channel, I carve the Bible into granite. And as I do that, I research and I reflect on the text. And then I share that with you. So let's look at the text where circumcision is introduced. And I give to you and to your seed after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be a God to them. And God said to Abraham, And as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your seed after you, in their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your seed after you, that every male among you be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Now there are more details in the chapter, but these verses are foundational. God establishes a covenant, an agreement, that Abraham and his descendants will receive the land of Canaan, and they will cut off the flesh of their foreskins, as the text says. Now, first, the Israelites, or more accurately, I should say the Judeans, did not invent the practice. The Egyptians and some Canaanite and Arab groups also practiced circumcision in various forms, usually as part of initiation rite of some sort, passage into puberty or the priesthood, for example. So it didn't come out of thin air. But there's a big difference. Those surrounding cultures generally practice circumcision on adolescents, not on infants. Genesis 17 changes that. The ritual is changed from marking a transition into adulthood into a sign of belonging from birth, an inherited membership in a community bound to a specific God. But we're still left with the question, why this ritual? Why that specific organ? In a puberty ritual, I can see marking the sex organ, but why for a theological covenant? The answer to that is something I had never really considered. Genesis 17 is about descendants. Verses 8, 9, and 10 all emphasize Abraham's offspring across generations. So the sign of participation in the covenant is placed on the organ that produces those descendants. The symbol and its meaning work together. The promise is about Abraham's future generations, and the sign is placed on the organ that participates in producing those offspring. There's also a really interesting wordplay. In Hebrew, the expression isn't to make a covenant, it's to cut a covenant. Karat berit. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, in the ancient world, covenants were accompanied by rituals, usually involving some type of physical symbol. Animals were sacrificed, they were cut, and blood was shed, meaning that the participants to the covenant were putting their bodies on the line. It wasn't just words. And that's exactly what Genesis 17 does. A covenant is still cut, but this time the cut isn't made on an animal, it's made on the body. Circumcision becomes the covenant cut, a permanent mark on human flesh. In Hebrew, the wordplay is impossible to miss, but it's almost completely lost in English. The symbolism continues in verse 14, where anyone who refuses the covenant is said to be cut off from the people. Now we'll look at that verse in more detail in the next video. But for now, it's important to note that circumcision isn't an arbitrary ritual. It's the physical expression of how covenants worked in the ancient world. And what first appears to be a strange, even barbaric Bronze Age practice turns out to be a precise physical expression of a theological idea.